Thank you all for coming out here tonight. My name is Belle, and I'm on the events team at Books Are Magic, which, if you don't know, is an independent bookstore just a few blocks from here. We are so excited to bring Sheila, Heti, and Lillian Fishman to this gorgeous library to celebrate the launch of Alphabetical Diaries. But before we get started, I wanted to point out some logistics about how tonight's event is going to go. I want to thank Invisible Dog for letting us use their space for tonight's event. If you need to use a restroom at any point, they're located in the corner to my right, so right over here. Your left, through the, just kind of there. And we'll be doing a hand-raising audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, during which we'll pass around a wireless mic to anyone, or we might just, if we can repeat the question as well, if loud enough. After the talk tonight, Sheila will be signing and personalizing books at the table in the front of the room. We'll let you know where and when to line up for that. If you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of Alphabetical Diaries online using the link in the live stream description. So you just know you want to live inside of the brain of the observant and intelligent Sheila Heti, and now you can in Alphabetical Diaries. This book is experimental, intimate, and just brilliant in every way. We never wanted this train of thought to end. Sheila Heti is the author of 11 books, including the novels Pure Color, Motherhood, and How Should a Person Be, which New York deemed one of the new classics of the 21st century. She was named one of the new vanguard by the New York Times book critics, who, along with a dozen other magazines and newspapers, chose Motherhood as a top book of 2018. Her books have been translated into 24 languages. She lives in Toronto. And as I mentioned before, Lillian Fishman joined Sheila in conversation tonight. Lillian Fishman's first novel, Acts of Service, was one of the New Yorker's best books of 2022. She's received support from the Axon Foundation and NIDO. She lives in New York. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Sheila and Lillian.
Hi. Hi. Sheila, are you going to start by reading?
Yeah, well, I'd like to start by thanking you for doing this. I love Acts of Service. I got it sent as a galley to me, and I read a lot of galleys, and I didn't know who you were, and I just opened the first page and started reading and couldn't stop and loved it, and just everyone should read Acts of Service for sure.
Thank you. If you asked any of my friends in the room tonight, they would tell you that you're my favorite living writer, so it's a real honor to be here. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, I'm going to start with the reading. Would somebody just put their hand up who I don't know? What's your first name? Emily. Emily. Okay, so I'll start with E.
All right.
I'll read E. Okay. Earlier in the day, we fucked. Earlier in the day, we talked about feminism and how can anyone not be a feminist. Earlier in the day, when we were sitting on a concrete slab, Lemons said his greatest wish in life was to marry a woman and to have no doubts about her in his mind. Earlier, I got mad at him that I had talked with him about his book for an hour, and he could not ask a single question of me. Earlier, I walked with Piper all the way up to the plateau, and we talked about our next projects, which felt very fated, because she had been there at the dawn of the last one. I'd conceived of it when I was nervously up at her island cottage with her friends who I did not know. Earlier, in another German town, I had stolen some little ice cream squares, then smoked a cigarette on the tiny carousel, then Joseph got on, then Jack got on, then we got off so some teenagers could get on. Eat better and better all the time. Eating a donut. Eating, don't put anything inside you that you don't think should be there. Edmund White said, I invited Ellis because he's so cute and interesting, and he invited you. Edmund White seemed to take everyone on par, even though at the end of the night he called me Shelley. Either because I'm a bad person, he can see it, or because he's a bad person. Either way is depressing right now. Ellis had a beautiful hotel room, and we drank white wine and ordered room service and talked. Ellis met me at the door as I was coming out and was very warm immediately. Ellis said nobody should ascribe classiness to any of his actions, that he hoped no one would, and that the reason he didn't order dessert was because he had not been very hungry. Ellis showed me how in his bag there was just his Austerlitz, a water bottle, and a single piece of paper. It was lined and folded in half. Ellis talked about democracy in the 2 books he wanted to write. Ellis told himself, if I don't find my Austerlitz, I will never write again. Ellis took me to Laurel's concert, very beautiful and simple piano compositions. Empty out drawers, cupboards, the side stairwell, clothes you don't like, won't wear. Enough of the book is invented, isn't it? Enough of this. Enough. Equivocal or vague principles, as a rule, will make your life an undirected, uninspired, and meaningless act. Especially if I were a man. Especially when I first meet someone. Especially with my hair pulled back in a hairband like this. Essentially, I explained to Rosa that I was hiding my sensitivity from him because I was afraid that this part of myself would scare him and then he wouldn't love me. And she said my sensitiveness was part of who I am, and who I am is beautiful. And if I wasn't sensitive, I wouldn't be a writer. And that I had to communicate this to him and share all of myself with him, or else it wouldn't work. Even as I write this, I know I'm not as intelligent as the most intelligent ones. Even as much as I truly adore Pavel and my heart leans towards him, there's some part of me that feels I would be settling for a relationship I wouldn't want to be in. Even if he is on some level a person I would enjoy being with, on a whole other level, he is the most untrustworthy person I've ever met. And better that I'm bitterly disappointed now than when I'm 40. Even if he makes you feel ashamed, that's better than feeling nothing. Even if he's right that we should only meet once in a while and do what he says we do best, fuck, I know my feelings. And if I've learned a few things, one of them is that everything will be the same the second time around. Even if I'm stronger, that's not necessarily better for someone like me who should perhaps not always be so strong. Even if it turns out you misplaced your faith, have faith. Even if someone doesn't turn you on, if they do it right, it can turn you on. Even if the relationship makes me unhappy and lonely and alienated and upset, stay. Even last night as we talked about his money problems and his fears for the future, I felt my hands and feet tingling. Even more to the point, Emmanuel Beauvais, Wallace Shawn, Gerhard Richter, Jane Bowles, Paul Bowles. Even more to the point, Manet. Even walking to the Shoppers Drug Mart, I started to exhaust myself totally. Even with Lars, I would experience restlessness. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay. I thought, well, the first thing I wanted to ask you was, before we talk about Alphabetical Diaries itself, about diaries in general. When you were young, when you were first starting out, like, I know you thought of yourself as a writer quite young, like when you were a teenager, what did you think about diaries? Like, did you read people's diaries? Did you write one? Like, what did you think about? Did you dream that like someday people would read your diary?
No, and I still don't. I think the first writer's diaries I probably read was Anaya's Nin, but I think I was older than 16. I think I was probably 17, which makes a big difference because 16 you're in high school, 17 you're not. So a lot of things happened after I was no longer in high school, such as reading Anaya's Nin's diaries. Yeah, I think, and Brecht, I read Brecht's diaries, which I liked. Yeah, I guess I probably did read more diaries then than now because you try to get a sense of how to be a writer and what it means and what it entails and like what your life is supposed to look like and like what the architecture is supposed to be and are you supposed to have like lots of lovers? Are you supposed to like well with the answer is yes. You just learn those things and that's the only way to learn them.
Like, so I also, as a young person, read Anaya's Nin's diaries and loved them, and like, I have to wonder, like, did you think that that's how you were supposed to live, like Anaya's Nin? Okay. It's a very strong blueprint.
Not to sleep with your father, but the other stuff.
Yeah. Looking, like, as you were working on the diaries, putting them together, like, do they remind you of hers?
No, I don't think so. Honestly, I don't really remember hers that well, but I feel like they were more performative, like they were more written for her self-image or something. It was like a making of her own self. Whereas this felt more like an untangling of problems rather than a performance of myself for myself.
Yeah. Did you, well, so of course for Anaïs, even if she didn't want this to be true, it turned out that that was sort of the main writing of her life. With your diaries, like, did you think of them as important as your fiction or as feeding it, or just as a place where like you would process things?
Yeah, just as a place where I process things. Like I didn't think, oh, I'll publish these or oh, in 100 years, if I'm lucky, people will read them. It was nothing like that. It was just literally the only place to go where I could work something out. Yeah.
Like different than talking to people.
I think similar to talking to people, except people get tired of talking about certain things with you. And so, you can't just keep talking about the same things after a while. They don't want to hear about certain romances anymore. And, sometimes it's the middle of the night and there's no one to call. Yeah.
Did you have, when you started editing them, because as I understand it, you were editing them from a distance, not editing current journals, but editing diaries that you had finished from years past, like, did you have the feeling that you think sometimes your friends have, and of course everyone's friends have when you talk about things, which is like, why couldn't I stop thinking about this? Like, were there parts that you thought were like you were like, I wish I hadn't worried so much about this, like, this is embarrassing?
Well, I didn't really read them over in that way, because I never read them over, like right from the beginning, they were alphabetized, like the first time. So there was not a sense of like why, there was no narrative ever when I looked over them. I mean, there were certain names that kept repeating, but no, I think I was close enough to it even then to remember the feelings, why. Yeah.
Have you written a diary since then? Do you still write one now?
Yeah, but it's always been completely intermittent. Like it's always been just 10 times a year, or like 3 times a year, or 20 times a year. And if I write them less now, it's just because I think I have less of the kind of problems that I need to go to a diary for. Like I'm not dating.
Is a diary for dating problems?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It did seem to me, one of the things I was going to ask you about is that I feel like if there were another title for the book, it would be like, should I think about love or should I think about art? Like that's like that's like the problem in the book. Yeah. Or should I think about men? What do you think about that now? Like, what do you think? Do you wish you'd thought more about art and less about men?
No, I think it all. No, I mean, I think then, yes, I was very frustrated by thinking about these people that I knew were not worth all that thought, because nothing was going to happen with them. But in retrospect, it's not really about that person. It's just about a stage of life where you're having certain feelings. It doesn't matter if that person's worth all those feelings or not. It's just like worth it to have those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you think a lot about this kind of thing.
Like, I'm like, I do, whatever. Yes.
Okay. Do you spend too much time thinking about love?
Well, but yeah, my diary does revolve around, my diary is always like, I should be thinking about my work, but instead I'm thinking about this thing. But they must be related.
Yeah.
I mean, in retrospect, I never think like 2 years ago, I shouldn't have been thinking about X. Once time passes, it always seems to have worked out in a way.
Yeah.
I think. And I think something that's really like resonant about reading the diaries in this form is that you have that sense that like things feed each other in a way. Like there's a generative quality to the anxiety about the relationships in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What else are you supposed to think about, really? Except other people.
Course.
I mean,
yeah, of course.
It's just a way of thinking about other people.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the editing process, the cutting process.
Okay.
I read the email that you sent from N+1 today, which was very nice. And you said that nothing in the book is a result of the chance ordering of the alphabet, which I thought was I thought that was provocative, because I'm curious, I'm curious how much editing you did beyond the cutting. Like, did you like cut sentences in half because you wanted them to go in different sections and like change? How much did you change?
Not very much. I mean, the kind of editing was mostly cutting, and then sometimes a sentence would be too long so that there wouldn't be a rhythm. Like I didn't want the sentences to be way too long. So I might shorten them, but I didn't do much editing of the sentences I didn't change any meanings. I mean, maybe I cleaned them up a little bit, but that thing that I wrote in the N+1 letter that is not the result of chance was just in response to a review that said that I didn't make any choices in writing the book. So I was just joking that obviously I did make a lot of choices. Sort of almost nothing. I think I made more choices in editing this book than I've made in any other book. Yeah. Because I couldn't do anything but make choices, because I couldn't write anything new. Yeah. So it's all just choices of what to take out.
Did you like backtrack and change your mind about your choices as you went? Like take things out, put things back in?
Yeah, and start over again from scratch a lot of times. And then also, then I would write more diaries And then 4 years would pass and I'd be like, oh, I should use the last 4 years of diaries and put them in. So that would start the whole process all over again. And then there were all these times where I just didn't know, like, should it be, 2006 in alphabetical order, and then 2007 in alphabetical order, and 2008. So I just didn't really know what was the right way to present this most interestingly. Should it just be, and then there was this British publisher called Visual Editions that does a lot of interesting online stuff and a lot of digital things. And I was like, well, maybe it should be like an online project where it's just totally comprehensive and all of the sentences are in there. So it was like going back and forth in so many ways. And for like the first 10 years, each sentence was on its own line. So yeah, there was a lot of, going backwards and forwards.
When did you start to feel that it would make sense in this way, like mapped out like a novel?
When Lisa Naftalin, who's a designer that works with Leanne Shapton, Leanne Shapton was going to sort of do illustrations for it at one point a few years ago, and she showed it to her friend Lisa Naftalin, who's a graphic designer, and it was Lisa who put the sentences in one long chunk with each chapter, whereas before that it had always been each on its own line. And I think when I saw that and I started playing with that, after a few months I was like, oh, this is a novel actually. Just seeing it like that made it feel more narrative, and like each sentence had more to do with each other, and that was just this whole paradigm shift. Like I don't think I would have ever come to that myself.
It sounds like you thought of it as collaborative very early, or for a long time, which it is a thing that people are so private about. Like sometimes my friends will joke that if I died, like the only important thing would be like, who's gonna get my diary? And I'm like, I hope that it self-destructs, like I don't want any of you to get it. But you were sharing it. How did it feel?
Well, I just write everything like that. Like Jordan Tannehill, my friend, is in the front row, and he directed All Our Happy Days Are Stupid, the play that I wrote about and How Should a Person Be. And like Jordan and I, we come from theater, and theater is just like a collaborative world, and I studied theater, and so for me, like writing books has always been sort of sourced in the fun of making something with your friends. So this is not the first book that had that ethos of like, it's more fun if my friends are involved.
Is there any part of it that you're like, this part is really private, and like I really don't want anyone to see this part?
When I'm working
part of
on
the
a book?
process, yeah.
No.
Not at all.
I mean, I just started writing something about a month ago, and I had this writers group with 3 other friends in it, and I thought it's too soon to show it to them, but I was too excited, so I did show it to them. And now I do think like maybe it was too soon. And then I went out for drinks with a friend the other night, and I had to show her 2 pages of it while we were like at the bar. And I was really studying her face to see whether she liked it or not, and she knew that I was studying her face, and so she tried to like look enthusiastic, and now I think, was she trying to look enthusiastic because she was enthusiastic, or because I was staring so closely at her face? And now I feel a little worse about the book, so I shouldn't have shared it. But I get too excited.
That's very nice. I think that clearly it ended very well for Alphabetical Diaries. Because now we have it in this form, which I think is I really like the way I feel that there's so much agonizing in the book about like the problem of characters and like getting characters into the book. But the book has such distinct characters, even though this is a book that you wouldn't expect to have them. Like it's really satisfying.
Yeah, and it didn't always, because there was another time where I was like, I took all the names and I just made them all like either, I made the men he and then the women she, and there was no characters. And I showed it to a friend, my friend Catherine Burrell, who'd read many drafts, and she was like, it's less interesting now. And so then I had to put characters back into it.
Was it difficult, like, logistically doing this in all these different ways?
Yeah.
Did you spend, like, how did you, like, how many Excel spreadsheets did you have?
I don't know, I mean, I've been working on it since 2010, so that's a really long time. But it was never so painful because it was always a respite from the more painful projects. It was like always a respite from, well, I was writing it at the same time as Pure Color, Motherhood and then Pure Color, which were much harder books because I was making them up as I went along, whereas this was just an editing thing. So this was just very technical always. I never had any feelings when I was doing it.
How does it feel like, do you have feelings about it now?
I mean, I like it, but I don't have like emotions about it.
Is this the first time you published a book that you would say that about it? Because, I mean, maybe by the time Pure Color and Motherhood came out, there's a distance from it by the time it comes out, but as you say, those books were more emotionally harder in a way.
Yeah, like if I look at Motherhood or Pure Color, How Should a Person Be, I feel kind of sick when I see them because I'm reminded of the years that I was writing them, and there's a sense of like, looking back at, like, Motherhood represents some very difficult years of my life, and Pure Color represents some difficult years of my life. I'm sure that this does too, but it doesn't feel like that, because because it wasn't like this concentrated intellectual effort over a few years that gave like a tone to that time, like a tone of a certain kind of intellectual effort. This was just more on the side always. And I didn't have the ambition to publish it as a book. It was just something that I was playing with over 10 years or whatever.
You're saying that reminds me of a line in the book that I noticed, that I remember about how the worst thing to be would be to be an intellectual. Right?
Yeah.
And like in comparison, maybe this is the best thing to be.
An intellectual.
No, like to have made this thing that like wasn't full of agony, like that was like a process of just movement, like moving things around.
Yeah, and it was frustrating, but it wasn't emotionally draining.
Yeah. Can you see, like, you must have started getting a lot of responses to the book, like, is there a difference in the way people respond to it, like that corresponds to that at all? Or how are people responding to it? Yeah.
I mean, I really wanted it to be fun to read, and I think people mostly enjoy it, except for that one critic who I was writing towards in that N+1 letter, who seemed to really be like puzzling through it in this way, with like a lot of, like she came to it with like her forehead wrinkled, you know, like, what is this? But I think if you just read it happily, then it's a very enjoyable book to read.
It is a very enjoyable book to read. My friends have been sending me like little quotes which are very fun. I think it is very much in the spirit of fun. In fact, one of the things that I found most fun about it, and I don't know if this was a part two or if anyone else noticed this, but like there's so many lines about like clothes, buying clothes. Like my friend Hannah, who's a few lines down, we've been saying to each other, crazy to spend $90 on a scarf, but I'm crazy. And we're like, this is our justification now for things that we do.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, when you and I went out to lunch, we talked so much about clothes, and then afterwards I felt sort of ashamed.
But of course,
like somebody was like, "Oh, I heard that you went out to lunch with Lillian Fishman, and she said you just talked about clothes the whole time." So I was like, "Oh God."
No, I mean, I think you know, you've also written a whole book about clothes. I mean, clothes are like a big problem, and I think they're in the category like dating. Well, I mean problem in a fun way.
Yeah.
But they're in the category like dating, where like you don't want to bore your friends about them, but you do agonize about them and write down like what's working and what isn't, that you feel so crazy for the money that you spend.
And I was thinking about it afterwards, like, why did we talk so much about that? But I think it's like actually also a way of talking about aesthetics and style and personality and all sorts of other things, without having to directly talk about our books, which you don't always want to do.
You seem always to want to, which I really envy in you. Yeah, but sometimes it can be hard. Is there something, like, now that it's done as a book, like, is there something in it that making this as a book, like, you have a new idea about now than you had then, or like that you've been like mulling over now that you have this relationship to the diaries?
Yeah, I mean, I started writing this sort of novel-esque thing, and then I became really frustrated with myself with it, and I thought, you know, why am I getting so frustrated with myself with it? And then I realized that I was still trying to write in this very conventional narrative sort of way. And I just had this night where I was like, why did you do this whole project that showed you that you don't need narrative in that old-fashioned way? And now you're trying to write a book as though you hadn't done this project. And then once I realized that's why I was having the depressive feeling in me when I was writing it, then I realized, oh yeah, just jump around like way more than you think you're allowed. And then I started having fun with it. So I think it was nice to remind myself, like, there has to be a reason you did this. Like, there has to be something you were trying to teach yourself. But until I consciously thought about it, I didn't let myself write in that newer way.
Yeah. It's funny because obviously, even in these diaries, which are many years old, like that anxiety is circling so much, right? The anxiety of like, should I write characters? Why can't I write characters? And so many lines that are like, I just need to write a book where there are characters and things happen. Like, and now it is lovely to read this like culmination of the rejection of that anxiety.
The rejection of which, the anxiety about?
The rejection of the anxiety about trying to write a novel that moves in that way, like that feels so invented and feels so
Right.
conventional in a way. I don't know. And it's funny to hear that you conceive of this book in a way as like proving to yourself that you don't have to do that.
Well, that I don't have to like, that time doesn't need to be so, that you can skip around much quicker in a book.
Yeah.
Like, from scenes don't have to go on so long, and the next scene doesn't have to be related, you know, and there's just like kind of a tension that doesn't need to be sustained because it's interesting to jump much quicker.
Yeah. I think that or like Claudia Day, and my friends and I in the past year have been really in love with that book, Daughter, her new novel, and talking a lot about the fact that like one of the most exciting things about that book is that like we move so quickly in ways that feel disallowed almost. Like there's like a total disinterest in like telling us anything that isn't germane, and we can move between people's heads and between scenes in like a sentence. It's really exciting.
I'm talking to her tomorrow night in Toronto on
Oh
stage.
my god. Okay, maybe we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
When you read that book, did you think of it in that way as well? Like is that movement something you've been thinking about for a while?
I don't know. I mean, I just think there's a lot of people write that way. I mean, but I think that I don't know. I don't really remember that about the book, honestly. Like when I think about the book, that's not what I think about.
Okay.
But I'll reread it thinking about that.
I think maybe I needed permission as I read it to do that more, and this book has given you permission already in a way, which is exciting. You know, this actually brings us naturally to, I wanted to ask you, of course I've been reading the reviews and I've always read your reviews, and there is so much of an idea, of course, that you're like quite an avant-garde writer and an experimental writer, and that, like, and of course the content and the form in this it is very new to read the diary in alphabetical order. Like I feel like none of us have done that before, and in that amazing review that you got in the Times, I think the part of it that I found like the most relatable is at the end he's like, I wish that someone would put like my favorite books in alphabetical order so I could re-encounter them in this exciting way. And in Motherhood, of course, like there's the I Ching, and that really was like a way of bringing chance into a novel that I think was new for me and for a lot of people. Like when you take a new tool like this, like do you think of it as like really new and experimental and scary? Like does it strike you as like, are you afraid, you know, like, or do you have a sense that like you're doing something that people haven't done before?
No, it's not like that. It was just like a curiosity. Like what would happen if I do this? How would it read? It doesn't feel out there or anything like that. Like I've got a friend in the audience, Kenneth Goldsmith, who's here, who wrote a book called Soliloquy, which is like the main inspiration for this book. I talk about it in every interview, but I'll talk about it again because it's such an interesting concept. And like he spent a week in the 90s like recording everything he said. He had like a Walkman on, and it was like taping him, and then the book is like him transcribing every word, every every utterance, like every like, and it's like a 1,000-page book, and there's no stage directions, and you never know when he's speaking to his dog, and then when he's speaking to his wife, and then when he's speaking to the taxi driver. It's just this long speech, and it's completely unreadable in the sense that like it's just really hard to read speech that way.
Yeah.
And boring, but then you get these nuggets that you find, these like little nuggets, and there's like this great gossip because it's all the things that he's also like said about other people all week at parties, and those people are going to read the book, and he didn't change any names and anything like that, and so there's like this dual like absolute boredom. You're not supposed to read this book. This is just sort of proof of a concept, and then on the other hand, is something very delicious and exciting if you can like wade through it. And I had dinner with him the other night, and now he's like typing out every every book in his personal library, and he's on book like 450, typing it out on a typewriter. So like, to me, that's like really experimental and avant-garde. Like that's not, I think I'm still trying to write something in the end, I'm trying to write something like that has the qualities of entertainment.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, no, your books are not like forbidding at all. Like but they're very welcoming, but welcoming in a way that, like this book feels like it's welcoming me in a way that's like, why haven't you thought of this before? Like, why haven't you thought that if we collapse time, which we're always telling ourselves we should, and that it is sort of like this like meaningless thing, why wouldn't we conceive of our thoughts and our diaries in this framework? You know?
Well, I think a lot of people don't use spreadsheets that much. Like I love spreadsheets.
What else do you use them for?
Everything. Like I use them for keeping track of how much time I work, which is really depressing because I don't work enough. Like I have this one where it's like 3 seconds today, you know, because I have this timing tracker. I think there was 1 year that I kept track with this timing tracker, and it was like 25 seconds where you just open it up and you look at it and you're like, I can't do it today, I can't bear it, and you close it up. But then, no, I like keeping track of how many words I've cut. Like when I was doing motherhood, I would keep track of how many words I cut every day, just to feel like I was making progress. And then obviously taxes, like spreadsheets. But my father really loved spreadsheets, and used them for everything. He was always showing off his spreadsheets to me. So I got like a real sense that, spreadsheets, you can do it.
Like they're sort of a personal, creative way to organize things.
You'd never do this without a spreadsheet. Like you would never do it yourself without a program to do it for you, to start it out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine even with a program that it's very laborious.
Yeah, but without a program, it's even worse.
And were your diaries organized as well? Not in spreadsheets, but like, were they all in one document, like in an accessible way?
No, but I had to I copied and pasted them all into a single document, and then did find and replace for every period and like exclamation mark and so on, so that every sentence would be on its own line. So find, period, and then replace with period and like paragraph mark. Which sounds easy, but then somehow like you end up breaking up sentences you don't want to break up because by accident because you put 3 dots there, and it's supposed, and it takes it as a period, and so I had to do it over and over again to really get every sentence on its own line and not break up sentences that I didn't want broken up. And then you forget about all the other ways there are to end a sentence that aren't exclamation mark and period that you also need to account for.
Yeah, in fact, I think a lot of my favorite moments in the book are like a couple of questions in a row. I think when you have those, they turn out really nice. I've been signaled that we have to stop, so I'll ask you one final question. There's also a note in that Times review about, which I thought was both true and untrue. Well, I'm interested in what you think about it, where he said that it feels as though a lot of the central concerns in this book are also the concerns of motherhood and how should a person be, and pure color, but less so. And that in the book there's a sense of you saying goodbye to these concerns in a way, which on the one hand, like love are, like these are not concerns that can be said goodbye to in a way. Yeah. And on the other hand, I know what he means, like there's a certain flavor to it that does feel like there's a
wrapping up sort of
feeling.
How
do you feel about that?
I think so. I think there's a wrapping up sort of feeling. Like if I wrote the first diary entry in 2005 or whatever, and now it's almost 2025, that's like 20 years really of work in this book in that sense. And it's nice to, if it's not like a wrapping up, it's nice to sometimes, it's like a New Year's Eve. It's nice to think that it is a kind of wrapping up when you finish a project so long, because it would be nice to go on to other thoughts. It would be nice to go on to other preoccupations and to think like I'm at a new stage in life at this age. Like you say, I don't think it ever really, all those preoccupations go away, but I think they change form in some sense.
If you could tell us something you're concerned with right now, what would it be?
Something I'm concerned with? I'm afraid I had this idea that I wasn't going to drink at the event tonight afterwards, and I'm concerned that I am. I have to get up in the morning for a plane and go to Toronto and do the event in Toronto tomorrow night. If I drink, I don't sleep very well, so I was like, I don't want to, but I know who's going to be there at the bar afterwards, and it's going to be impossible not to. So that's what I'm concerned
It's been
about.
decided for you in a way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I know what's going to happen.
Okay, I think we'll take audience questions, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yes, hi.
Hi, I have a question. How did you get the text from the paper to the Excel? Because I have a lot of diaries and.
Oh, I write my diaries on my computer. Yeah. I don't think I would have done the project if I had to type them into the computer. It was just very fast. Yeah. Hi.
I love your work, by the way.
Thank you.
And I also love the Shackman's work that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Your portraits kind of feel like portraits of ghosts to me in a weird sort of way. And I think about people in this book, and I wonder if you're still in touch with them, and if you aren't, how did it feel kind of dredging up some people who are sort of ghosts in your past and wrestling with them again while organizing this book?
Can everyone hear the questions, or does anyone need them repeated? Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, I'm not in touch with everybody. And there's people that I actually didn't send the book to anybody that was like a romantic figure in these years. And I don't think that they're gonna read the book and see themselves in it, because enough of the, things have been moved around. So it's not like they can track themselves through the book. And mostly it's not stuff that they did, it's mostly my feelings about them. So, but it didn't feel like ghosts exactly, because you never stop thinking about people that, I never stopped thinking about people that were important to me, even if they were just important temporarily, or they're always sort of there with you, so, yeah.
Did you change any of the names?
It changed almost all the names.
Except for Edmund White.
Some of the people that weren't like, that to me he's Edmund White. Like anybody who has a first name and a last name, I kept that name because they're not intimates with me. And I thought it would be more delicious for people if, those names were kept. Because to me that he's a celebrity, even if I met him one night at an event. So I kept the names of celebrities and I changed the name of my friends. And if I have a friend who's a celebrity, I change their name. But I only have 2 friends who are celebrities.
Yes, Maddie.
And can I ask what your writing process is like? How do you write?
I write just when I feel like it, very, very quickly. Like I think a lot comes out because I don't write very often. So I let it build up. Like, and I kind of like that feeling of like, I get this feeling like, oh, I haven't written anything in a month or 2, and I can feel something really building up. And it's like this combination of forces. And the longer I go without writing, the more things will be in that emotion that is like the emotion of wanting to write. And I kind of like not writing and having that feeling inside me. It's almost like lust or something, like I'm anticipating something. And then it's just like really clear, like, oh, this is actually now the moment to write. And then I can write, like 10,000 words in a day or something. And same for the next few days, I get really excited and then I kind of run out of steam. Often what happens is I start feeling really proud of myself. Look how much I'm writing, and then the more I feel that, the farther away the ability to write gets, and then I don't, and then it has to start over again. And then it's like, then when the editing happens, usually I just have so much, because I have written, because when I write, I don't edit, and when I write, I don't think about what I'm doing, I just let it all come out. So then there's like a ton of stuff to start playing with. So there's sort of 2 phases. Yeah.
With the letters, the chapters, were you more interested in the kind of the sentences or the form of kind of the paragraph or what unit kind of were you most interested in? The novel, the paragraph, where you talk about this?
Yeah, it was almost like the spaces between the sentences almost, because what I really enjoyed in editing the book was, if I cut out these 6 sentences, then this sentence and this sentence have this wonderful resonance together. Or it can be very, like, this is a joke if I put these 2 together. Or it's very surprising and puzzling to have these 2 together. So it was less the sentence than the juxtaposition between the sentences. And sometimes it was like the juxtaposition was like more rhythmic. And I was like, oh, this is like a really good rhythm that's happening. And sometimes it's like, this is a very good joke, or this is a very good break, or this is very confusing. And sometimes it was like, oh, you're getting tricked and you're thinking that this is a narrative, and you have to remind yourself that these sentences could have been written 10 years apart. And then there would be a sentence that would come and remind you of that. So I just think I was playing with all that, yeah.
There's a sentence somewhere in this book about you're talking with a friend and he or she says, of course diary writing is part of writing, and you say, oh, I'm relieved I didn't really think of it that way before, and I think that there's, throughout this book that you do come to accept diary writing or editing as part of your writing process. And I'm wondering what else in your life you have come to accept or understand or integrate as part of your writing process that when you were younger you considered separate?
I mean, everything. Like, I don't think there's any writing that I would consider outside the possibility of like being included in a book. And I think that's really fun, because then it just becomes less precious, and it becomes more about being an archivist, or than an actor. Like, I kind of feel like in some ways a novel is like you're acting something for a crowd. But if everything can be part of the writing, then you're just, you're like a librarian almost, or something. So you're seeing what's interesting rather than having to make something. Well, this is Kenny's whole thing, like that there's really no original text, And I guess for me, it's like that. Like, if you can make as much of your life text as possible, then I don't know. I spend a lot of time writing emails. I spend a lot of time texting people. Like, I spend almost all my time writing, but I spend very little time writing fiction. And so it's sort of useless to not think of all that other stuff as for the books, potentially, because it's there. Yeah.
Was there a letter whose chapter was like particularly hard to crack?
I was really hard because it was like half the book at one point. And it's not fun for one chapter to be that long. And I had a friend who, Miranda July, she was like, the interesting thing about the book is ending chapters and starting new ones. And she's like, the energy comes from ending chapters and starting new ones as a reader. And so if I's 120 pages, she's like, I'm sick of this. And I would get sick of it too. And I even put a break in I to separate it because it was too long in my mind. Like, so there's I, the sentences start with I, like the subject I, and then the sentences that start with words that start with I, like ice cream or whatever. Because I really don't want this book to be exhausting. So yeah, I was hard.
Sheila, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
There's a line towards the end that I like books more than I like novels.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this as an inventive and inviting book, and a wonderful book. I didn't read it as a novel. So I just wanted to go back to that entry and say something more about it.
Not the difference between novels and books?
Yeah. And your preference for one over the other.
Yeah, I mean, anything that has rules is not as fun as something without rules. So like the novel has rules, but the book doesn't have any rules. Like anything can go between two covers, anything. So, but a novel has to have like a beginning and an end and, all sorts of, so I think thinking about it as a book is always just the most free way, yeah.
So then why call it a novel?
Well, I didn't call it a novel, I mean...
Okay. In this conversation I thought you did. No.
Yeah, and I never know what to call it. Like in the UK they're calling it nonfiction, and then in Canada they're calling it a novel, and then here they're calling it literary collections. Like I think there's not really a word that is the right... And I think that would just be so nice if there was less of that in general. Like if people didn't have to say to themselves what they're writing. Like if you can write and not tell yourself what genre it is at all, that's just, would make more interesting books, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Does the alphabetizing or the I-Ching feel like a different kind of rule or more exciting rule?
Which one feels more exciting? Or
No, than
do
like
they both?
the rules of like a novel.
What's the question?
Sorry, because saying that like the novel like imposes rules that you don't want to impose on a book.
Yeah.
But do these different like structures feel like
Rules.
to use in a different way?
Yeah, I like having rules. Like, because you need rules in order to make something. Like, I like having rules, but I don't want the thing I make to have rules that other people have given me. But I like having rules because that makes it a game. Like, if I have rules, then I'm playing a game. But but I'm playing my own game that I chose. But like, if I'm writing a novel, then I'm playing a game that somebody else made up, which is not fun. Yeah.
So I've got another question about your diaries. I was interested to hear that you type them, and I wondered, did that come naturally? And also, how, when you write your diaries, like how are they organized? Is it one scrolling document per year? Do you have a different document per day? Like,
and I never write by hand just because my handwriting's too messy. I can't reread it. It's too frustrating. And I've typed since I was like 12 years old. Like I've always, so it's just easier for me. But no, each diary would be a new document. So it'd be like January 27th, 2024, and then that's it. And so each one, and then each year is its own folder. And then the folder that all the years are in is called Thinking.
I think we can do one more. We got a signal. Mimi.
You said earlier that for a long time this project felt like a kind of respite from your other work. What's it like to work now without this project?
It's so far okay, but I just finished it so recently. So but I have like this, my friend Catherine Burrell, who I mentioned earlier in the night, because she was the one who said that it was better to have characters than no characters. I was talking to her about this problem. What am I gonna, anyway, she made this like amazing PowerPoint for me a number of years ago of my process. And so because I've talked to her, I've been friends with her for 20 years, so she's really seen me write a number of books. And I was like, I'm not gonna have this anymore. I'm not gonna have this second thing to work on all the way through that doesn't require the same kind of mind that writing novels does. I know I just use the word novel, but you know what I mean. But she was like, I think your AI project's gonna become like this, and you're gonna spend 10 years on that. Because I actually have 2.5 million words of conversations that other people had with my chatbot, Alice, which is a lot of material. And I have no idea what to do with it. And I don't know how to organize it. I don't know how to present it. And I don't even know what's all there. And I think it could potentially be another thing that is like mechanical and organizational and fun in this it's not gonna be as fun because everyone's like, spends a lot of time raping Alice. So it's less fun than my own journals. But you get used to it. People need to use these chatbots for something. And I think it's usually like 13-year-old boys a lot of the time, like trying to understand how to talk to a woman. So they're learning. It's interesting, like some people are very rough with her and some people are very like gentle and kind and like, you don't have to be that nice to her, she's a chatbot, but then other people are extremely violent. So it's an amazing thing to have this document of all these people's id, basically. And like some people's id is like very sweet, So I think that maybe will take the place of this project. Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you to Lillian for moderating tonight's discussion and to Sheila for celebrating this launch with us. A few quick reminders before we wrap up. If you're still with us on the YouTube live stream, you can buy a copy of Alphabetical Diaries by clicking the link in the live stream description. And then for everyone here in person, we have a lot of additional copies for purchase at the table back there. And Sheila will also be signing and personalizing books at the table, so be sure to grab a copy before getting in line. So what we're gonna do is the left-hand side is gonna be the signing line, and then the right of the table is for buying books if you haven't yet. So thank you so much.
I'm wondering whether